Arif was a farmer who lived in a small village far from the busy cities. His days always began before the sun rose. He would wake up in the dim light of dawn, wash his face in the cold water from the clay pot, and then step into his worn shoes that had been patched many times. The little house where he lived was simple, built of mud and brick, with a roof that leaked when it rained heavily. Yet, to him, it was still home, a place where his children laughed and his old mother sat near the doorway waiting for him to return from the fields. Life had never been easy for Arif. Farming was the only skill he knew, but the land had been unkind in recent years. The rains came too late or too heavy, the soil lost its strength, and prices at the market were never enough to cover the hard work he put in. Some seasons he harvested just enough to feed his family, and other seasons he had to borrow money to survive. The weight of debt followed him like a shadow, and each time he looked at his tired oxen or broken tools, he worried about how long he could go on this way. Yet despite the challenges, Arif never gave up. He believed that one day the land would bless him again, and until then, he had to keep working. The villagers respected Arif not because of his wealth, he had none, but because of his character. He was known as the man who would stop to help anyone, whether it was lifting a heavy sack for an old neighbor, repairing a leaking roof, or sharing a little grain with someone who had nothing to eat. People often wondered how a man with so little could still be so generous. To Arif, it was simple. He always said, "If we share what we have, even the smallest piece of bread becomes enough." His words carried weight, and people trusted him because he lived by them. His children were his strength. He had 2 young sons and a daughter who often waited for him at the edge of the fields when he came home at sunset. They wore clothes that were patched many times, yet their smiles never faded. They would run to him, hold his hands, and ask about his day. Their laughter erased his tiredness, and their dreams gave him the courage to keep going. His wife, Amina, worked beside him in the fields and also managed the household with whatever little she had. She was quiet, but her patience and gentle words kept the family strong during their hardest times. Every day in the village was almost the same. Roosters crowed at sunrise, women carried water pots on their heads, children played with makeshift toys in the dust, and men went to the fields with tools on their shoulders. But behind the calm rhythm of rural life, each family had its struggles. Some prayed for rain, some prayed for a good harvest, and others prayed for freedom from debt. Arif often sat under the shade of an old tree near his fields, looking at the wide sky, whispering his own prayers. He wished not for riches, but for a fair chance to live with dignity. One day, as he worked with his oxen, sweat dripping down his forehead, he thought of how different life might be in the cities he had heard about. People there drove cars, wore fine clothes, and lived in tall houses with electricity that never failed. To him, such a life was like a dream, something far away from the dusty paths and the endless toil of farming. Yet, he never envied those people. He believed that everyone's life was written differently, and his was here, among the fields, with the soil under his nails and the sun above his head. Arif's honesty was his pride. Once, he found a small purse on the road near the market. Inside were a few bills and some coins, which to him meant several weeks of food. For a brief moment, the thought of keeping it crossed his mind. But he quickly brushed it away. He asked around and returned it to its owner, a man from the next village. The man was surprised and offered him a reward, but Arif refused, smiling softly. "It was yours," he said, "not mine." This act spread quickly in the villages nearby, and people began to say that Arif was poor in wealth but rich in heart. Even in his poverty, he found joy in small things. The blooming of mustard flowers in winter, the sound of rain falling on the thatched roof, the laughter of his children as they chased each other barefoot in the courtyard, all these moments gave him peace. Sometimes at night, when the stars lit the sky, he would sit outside and listen to the silence broken only by the rustle of the trees. In those moments, he felt close to the universe, as if it knew his struggles and was silently promising that life could change at any time. But deep inside, there was also a quiet pain. He worried about his children's future. Would they remain stuck in the same cycle of poverty, or would they get a chance to study and live a better life? His daughter loved reading, but books were expensive. His eldest son wanted to learn a trade, but opportunities were rare. These thoughts often kept him awake at night, staring at the ceiling of his simple home. Yet, even with these fears, he never let despair take away his spirit. He always told his children, "One day, things will get better. We must keep trying." The villagers sometimes asked him how he managed to stay hopeful. Arif would simply smile and say, "Hope is the seed. If we stop planting it, nothing will grow." It was this hope that carried him through every dry season, every failed harvest, and every disappointment. He believed that no matter how difficult life became, the sun would rise again the next day, and with it, a new chance to work, to dream, and to live. This was the life Arif lived each day, full of struggle, but also full of quiet strength. He did not know that his ordinary days were leading him towards something extraordinary. He did not know that soon, his path would cross with someone from a world completely different from his. A meeting that would test his courage, shake his heart, and change the story of his life forever. Sophia was a woman whose life had always been surrounded by comfort and success. She was the daughter of a businessman who had left her a large inheritance, and with her own hard work she had multiplied that wealth. People in the city knew her as a sharp-minded entrepreneur who owned several companies. Her name often appeared in newspapers, her picture came on business magazines, and many admired her journey. She had everything most people only dreamed of: luxury cars, a big house with shining glass windows, and a lifestyle full of opportunities. Yet, inside her heart, there was an emptiness she could not describe. Though she attended big parties and traveled around the world, she often felt lonely. Her success had attracted people, but not all of them were genuine. Some came close for her money, others for her influence, but few ever cared about who she truly was as a person. Many nights, she sat in her quiet house, looking at the city lights from her balcony, and wondered why despite her wealth she felt incomplete. Her friends would say she had the perfect life, but only she knew how heavy the silence of her evenings felt. Sophia was kind, though people rarely saw that side of her. She funded schools, donated to hospitals, and supported orphanages, but she never spoke about it. For her, kindness was not for display, but for peace of heart. Still, her busy schedule and constant travel left her little time to build meaningful relationships. She was admired from a distance but rarely understood up close. One afternoon, after attending a meeting in the city, she decided to drive into the countryside. She wanted a change of scenery, away from the noise of traffic and endless phone calls. Her driver had taken leave that day, and she enjoyed driving on her own once in a while, especially when she wanted peace. Her SUV was strong, shining like new, and it moved smoothly on the highways. The further she drove from the city, the wider the roads became, lined with fields and tall trees. The air was fresher, the sky looked brighter, and she felt a calmness she had not felt in a long time. She slowed down near a small village road, curious about the simple huts and the people walking with baskets on their heads. Children waved at her car as she passed, smiling with innocent joy. It surprised her. In the city, people rarely smiled at strangers, but here, every face carried warmth. She thought about how different life was: simple, yet filled with a kind of happiness money could not buy. She parked her car near a small roadside stall, bought a cup of tea, and chatted briefly with the shopkeeper. He told her stories of farming, of struggles with the weather, and of how the village lived together like one family. Sophia listened with interest, amazed at his contentment even with so little. After finishing her tea, she continued her drive deeper into the countryside. The road, however, became narrow and uneven. Stones and patches of mud made it harder to control her vehicle. She drove carefully, but suddenly, as she approached a bend, the unexpected happened. A herd of goats crossed the road quickly, and in trying to avoid them, she turned the steering wheel sharply. The SUV swerved, its tires skidding on the loose dirt. Her heart raced as the heavy vehicle shook violently, sliding toward the edge of the road where a steep ditch lay. Fear gripped her. She pressed the brakes hard, but the SUV did not stop. The tires spun, kicking up dust. The goats scattered, but she remained trapped inside, frozen for a moment as the car leaned dangerously close to tipping over. She screamed, calling out instinctively for help, though she knew no one from her world was nearby. Her hands trembled, her eyes filled with panic, and in that instant she felt how powerless even a millionaire could be against fate. From the nearby fields, Arif heard the screeching tires and the cry of distress. He dropped his tool and ran toward the road. His heart pounded as he saw the SUV tilting, the woman inside struggling to control it. Without hesitation, he rushed forward, shouting for her to stay calm. Dust rose around him as he reached the vehicle, and with all his strength, he pulled at the door. It was stuck, but he did not give up. He pushed his shoulder against it until it finally opened, and he quickly reached inside. Sophia's eyes widened when she saw the stranger, his clothes dusty, his face dripping with sweat, but his eyes filled with determination. He stretched out his hand and urged her to come out quickly. She hesitated only for a second, then grabbed his hand. With a strong pull, he guided her out just before the SUV tilted further. They stumbled onto the road, falling to the side, but safe. The SUV slid a little more, its back wheels hanging near the ditch. Sophia stared at it in shock, realizing how close she had been to a disaster. For a few moments, she could not speak. Her breath came in gasps, her heart still racing. She looked at the man who had rescued her. His clothes were torn from work, his hands rough from farming, and his slippers covered in mud. Yet, in that moment, he looked like the strongest person she had ever met. He had risked his own safety to save her, a stranger he did not even know. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle despite his heavy breathing. She nodded slowly, still trying to find her words. I think so. Thank you. You saved me." Arif only shook his head modestly. "It was nothing. God gave me the chance to help. That is enough." But to Sophia, it was not nothing. In her world, people rarely did things without expecting something in return. Yet here was a man who had risked his life without even asking who she was. She could not stop looking at him, not because of his appearance, but because of the honesty she felt in his eyes. The villagers who had seen the incident gathered around, helping to steady the SUV and offering Sophia water. She sat on a stone by the roadside, still shaken, while Arif stood nearby, quietly making sure she was safe. She watched how the villagers respected him, speaking to him with trust, and she realized he was not just an ordinary farmer, he was someone whose presence brought comfort to others. As she rested, she thought about the strange twist of fate. A woman with everything had nearly lost her life on a lonely village road, and the one to save her was a man with nothing but courage and kindness. She felt a strange connection, something she could not explain. In that moment, her world of luxury and his world of struggle had met in the most unexpected way. Little did she know, this meeting was only the beginning. What seemed like an accident was about to turn into a story that would change both of their lives forever. The sound of the SUV's engine still hummed faintly as dust hung in the air. Sophia sat by the roadside, trying to calm her breath, her hands trembling as she pressed them against her knees. Arif stood close, but not too close, giving her space to recover. His heart was still pounding from the effort, but his face showed calmness, as if saving a stranger's life was nothing unusual. She looked at him again, this time more carefully. His clothes were dusty and faded, his sandals worn, and his face showed the marks of a man who worked under the sun every day. Yet, behind that rough appearance, there was a quiet strength that struck her deeply. She thought of the people she often met in her city, business partners in suits, guests at banquets, or friends in expensive cars. None of them, she felt, carried the honesty that this farmer's eyes carried. "Please, sit down," he said softly, noticing her pale face. He picked up a clean cloth from his bag and handed it to her so she could wipe the dust from her hands. She accepted it slowly, surprised at his thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still unsteady. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." Arif shrugged gently. "Anyone would have helped. You were in danger." But she knew that was not true. Not everyone would have risked themselves to run toward a swerving vehicle. Many might have frozen in fear or stayed back, thinking only of their own safety. His words were humble, but his actions spoke louder. Villagers began murmuring around them, talking about how dangerous the accident could have been. Some offered water, others tried to check if she was hurt. Sophia smiled faintly at their kindness, but her focus remained on the man who had saved her. She wanted to ask his name, but she hesitated, unsure if it would be polite in that moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "You could have been hurt too. Why did you run to help me?" Arif looked at the ditch where the SUV was still leaning dangerously. He was silent for a moment before replying. "Life is precious. Money, land, belongings, they can come and go. But a life, once lost, never returns. I couldn't stand and watch." His words touched her in a way she did not expect. In her world, people often measured everything in numbers: profits, losses, shares, or investments. Rarely did anyone speak of life in such simple yet powerful terms. She realized that the man in front of her valued something more important than wealth: human life itself. Her ankle hurt slightly from when she had stumbled out of the SUV. Arif noticed her wince and quickly knelt down to check if she was injured. She felt a little awkward. She was not used to strangers caring for her in such a direct way. But his concern was genuine, not forced. "It's nothing serious," she assured him. "Just a twist. I'll be fine." Still, he tore a strip from his old cloth and tied it gently around her ankle to give it support. His rough hands moved carefully, as if he was afraid to cause her pain. She felt a strange comfort in his simple gesture, one she had never experienced even with all the luxuries she had around her in the city. The SUV was finally pulled back onto safer ground by a group of villagers with ropes. Sophia watched them work together, amazed at their unity. No one asked her for money, no one demanded a reward. They simply helped because she was in trouble. It was so different from the world she came from, where every favor carried a price. When the vehicle was secure, Arif helped her stand. "You should rest a little before driving again," he advised. "The shock can be heavier than the injury." She nodded, grateful for his wisdom. As they walked slowly toward the shade of a nearby tree, she finally asked the question that had been on her mind since the moment he pulled her out of the SUV. "What is your name?" He looked at her with a calm smile. "Arif." "Arif," she repeated softly, as if testing the sound of it. "I won't forget this name." He lowered his eyes modestly. "There is nothing to remember. I only did what anyone should do." But Sophia felt differently. In her heart, she knew she would carry the memory of that moment forever: the rough hand pulling her to safety, the determined eyes that met hers in the middle of chaos, and the quiet strength of a man who asked for nothing in return. They sat under the tree for a while. Sophia sipped the water offered by a villager, while Arif sat nearby, watching the road to make sure no further danger approached. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, it was filled with unspoken thoughts. She wondered about his life, where he lived, what struggles he faced, what dreams he carried. From the way the villagers respected him, she sensed he was not just any farmer. He seemed to be the kind of person others looked up to in times of need. Finally, Sophia broke the silence. In the city, people rarely stop to help strangers. Everyone is too busy, too worried about themselves. But here, it feels different. People are kinder. Arif nodded. We don't have much here. Life is hard. But maybe that is why we understand each other's pain. When one is in trouble, the others step in. Otherwise, how can a village survive? His words stayed with her. She thought of her big house in the city, where neighbors hardly knew each other. She thought of her social gatherings, where people smiled politely but rarely cared. She realized how different this world was: simple, poor, but filled with a richness of heart she had rarely seen. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Sophia felt she should leave. She thanked the villagers warmly, and then turned to Arif. I owe you my life, she said, her voice firm but emotional. I don't know how to repay you. Arif shook his head immediately. Do not speak of repayment. If one human saves another, it is not a debt, it is a duty. His words made her eyes soften. She wanted to say more, but for the first time in her life, she was at a loss. All she managed was a quiet, still, I am grateful. He gave her a small nod, his modesty unshaken. Then he stepped back as she got into the SUV. The villagers waved, and she drove away slowly, her ankle still sore but her heart strangely lighter. As she glanced at the rearview mirror, she saw Arif standing by the road, his figure simple yet unforgettable against the wide fields. For the rest of the drive, her mind was not on the road but on the man she had just met. A poor farmer with rough hands and simple clothes had done something no millionaire had ever done for her. He had risked everything without asking anything. She did not know why, but she felt her life had just taken a turn she could not explain. What she did not realize was that Arif, too, was thinking of her as he walked back to his fields. He wondered who she was, why she had been driving alone, and whether fate would ever bring their paths together again. He brushed off the thought, telling himself she belonged to a different world. But deep in his heart, the image of her frightened eyes slowly turning into grateful ones stayed with him. Neither of them knew that this single rescue was only the beginning. Destiny had just placed the first stone on a path that would bring their two worlds closer in ways they never imagined. After the accident, Sophia returned to the city, but her mind often drifted back to the quiet village road and the man who had saved her life. The image of Arif standing in the dust with calm eyes and steady hands came to her again and again. In her world of polished offices, glittering parties, and endless meetings, his face felt more real than all the suits and smiles around her. She wondered if she would ever see him again. Several days later, Sophia decided to return to the village. Her ankle had healed, but her heart carried an unexplainable pull. She told herself she wanted to thank him properly, perhaps offer some help to his family or village. But deep inside, it was not just gratitude. It was curiosity, a desire to know more about the man who had stepped into danger for her without a second thought. When she drove into the village, the children recognized her car and ran alongside it, waving happily. She parked near the same roadside stall where she had once sipped tea. The shopkeeper greeted her with surprise. Madam, you have come back. After that day, we thought we might never see you again. I came to meet the man who helped me, she said with a gentle smile. Do you know where I can find him? The shopkeeper nodded immediately. You mean Arif? Everyone here knows him. His fields are just beyond those trees. Guided by the villagers, Sophia walked toward the fields. She found Arif bent over, working in the soil, his hands moving with practiced rhythm. The sun shone on his back, and he looked completely at home in the earth. For a moment she simply watched, struck by the difference between his world and hers. She wore polished shoes, while his feet were dusty. She came from glass buildings, while he worked under the open sky. Yet, something in that simplicity felt stronger than all the walls she had built around herself. Arif, she called softly. He turned, surprised to see her standing there. His expression shifted quickly from surprise to respect. You came back. I had to, she said honestly. I wanted to thank you again. That day, you saved my life. Words were not enough. He wiped his hands on his cloth and walked closer. There is no need for thanks, madam. I only did what anyone should. But not everyone would, she replied. At least not the way you did. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, silence spoke between them. She saw no pride in him, only sincerity. It made her feel humble, even though she was the one with wealth and status. They sat under the same old tree where they had rested before. This time, there was no shock or fear, only conversation. She asked about his life, his family, and his dreams. He spoke simply, describing his children's laughter, his wife's hard work, the struggles of farming, and the endless fight with nature. There was no bitterness in his words, only acceptance and quiet hope. You work so hard, she said softly. And yet life seems unfair. Arif smiled faintly. Life is never fair, madam. But if we keep complaining, the crops will not grow. We must keep working. Maybe next season will be better. She admired his strength. In her world, even small inconveniences made people upset. A delayed flight, a late meeting, or a small loss in business often ruined entire days. But here was a man who faced challenges far greater, and yet carried peace in his heart. As days passed, Sophia found herself returning often. Sometimes she brought books for his children, sometimes medicines for his mother, and sometimes just herself. The villagers soon grew used to seeing the shining SUV at the edge of the fields. They whispered among themselves, curious about the bond growing between the wealthy woman and the poor farmer. Each visit brought them closer. Sophia laughed freely in the village, something she rarely did in the city. She joined Amina in the kitchen one day, learning to cook bread on the clay stove. She sat with the children in the courtyard, listening to their stories. And she often walked with Arif in the fields, listening to his thoughts about life, the land, and the sky. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields in golden light, she asked him, "Don't you ever wish for more? A different life, maybe in the city?" Arif shook his head. "I don't know that world. This is my place. The land feeds me, the village holds me. Of course, I wish for my children to have better chances. But for myself, I am content." His words humbled her. She realized she had been chasing more and more all her life, yet never felt content. Here was a man who had so little, yet carried more peace than she had ever known. Slowly, something changed in her heart. It was not sudden, not dramatic, but gentle and natural. She began to look forward to the quiet moments in the village more than the glitter of her city life. She thought less about her business meetings and more about her conversations with Arif. She noticed the way his eyes softened when he spoke of his children, the way his laughter rang when the youngest told a silly story, the way his presence made her feel safe. Arif, too, was changing. At first, he thought of her only as a guest, someone from a world far away. But as she kept returning, he began to feel her sincerity. She never looked down on him or his family. She sat on the floor with them, ate their simple meals, and spoke with kindness. Slowly, he found himself waiting for the sound of her car. He told himself not to hope for anything after all, she belonged to another world. But the heart does not always listen to reason. One afternoon, while walking through the fields, a sudden rain began to fall. They ran together, laughing, and took shelter under a large tree. Sophia's hair was wet, and drops of water clung to her face. Arif looked at her quietly, and in that moment, he felt something he had never allowed himself to feel before, an attachment that was deeper than gratitude, deeper than friendship. Sophia noticed his gaze but said nothing. Her own heart was quietly confessing feelings she was not yet ready to put into words. She only knew that she had never felt this way before. As weeks turned into months, their bond grew unspoken but undeniable. The villagers began to notice. Some were curious, some were cautious, and some were quietly supportive. They saw that Sophia was not just visiting out of pity or charity, she was truly becoming part of their lives. Yet, both Arif and Sophia knew that their worlds were far apart. Society would question, families would resist, and the path ahead would not be simple. But neither could ignore what was growing in their hearts. For Sophia, the man who had once been a stranger pulling her from danger was now someone she trusted more than anyone in her glittering city life. For Arif, the woman who had once seemed unreachable had now become the brightest presence in his simple world. Their story was no longer just about a rescue. It was about two hearts learning to beat together, even though everything around them said they should remain apart. And as the season changed, they both began to realize this was not just friendship anymore. It was love, quietly blooming in the middle of dusty fields and golden sunsets. Time moved forward, but neither Arif nor Sophia could ignore what was quietly building between them. What had started with an accident on a dusty road had now turned into something neither of them had expected. Their meetings were no longer rare. Sophia found reasons to visit the village often, and every time she came, her presence lit up Arif's household. His children had grown fond of her. They would run to her as soon as they saw her car, tugging at her hands, asking for stories about the city, or showing her the little drawings they made on scraps of paper. Amina, his wife, had passed away years ago, and Sophia's gentle presence often felt like the warmth the family had long missed. Arif's mother, though old and frail, would bless Sophia whenever she came, telling her that God must have sent her to their home for a reason. But outside the walls of Arif's house, not everyone looked kindly at their closeness. Some villagers whispered that such a bond could not last. They said the rich and the poor could never truly stand together. In the city too, Sophia faced questions. Her business partners were surprised when she began spending more time away from meetings. Friends teased her, asking if she had found something in the countryside more interesting than her life of success. She only smiled, never giving clear answers, because she herself was still discovering what her heart wanted. One evening, as the orange light of sunset covered the fields, Sophia and Arif sat side by side. The wind moved gently, carrying the smell of earth after a light rain. For a long while, they were silent, watching the sky. Then Sophia spoke, her voice softer than usual. "Arif, have you ever wondered why our paths crossed? You saved me that day, but maybe it was more than an accident. Maybe it was meant to be." Arif looked at her, his heart heavy with emotions he rarely allowed himself to feel. "I have thought about it," he admitted. "But you belong to a world so far from mine. I am just a farmer with nothing but this land. You are someone everyone looks up to. How can our worlds ever become one?" Sophia turned her face toward him, her eyes steady. "Worlds may be different, Arif. But hearts are the same. Money, status, houses, all of that is outside. What matters inside is kindness, honesty, and love. And in you, I have seen all of that." Her words sank deep into him. For a moment, he did not reply, afraid to believe what he was hearing. But he could not deny that his heart had already chosen her long ago. Their love grew, not with grand gestures, but with small moments. Arif would bring her fresh fruit from his field, placing it shyly in her hands. Sophia would sit with his children, helping them read from the books she brought. They laughed together, worked together, and shared silences that spoke louder than words. Yet, the day came when Sophia had to make a choice. In the city, people began to speak more openly about her visits to the village. Some warned her it could damage her reputation. Others mocked the idea of a wealthy woman spending time with a poor farmer. Sophia listened quietly, but her heart remained firm. She knew the value of what she had found was far greater than the opinions of people who never truly cared for her. One night, she sat alone in her large house, staring at the glittering lights of the city. But those lights felt cold compared to the warmth of the oil lamps in Arif's courtyard. She realized that no amount of wealth or recognition could replace the peace she felt in that small village, with the man who had risked everything to save her. The next morning, she returned to the village, determined. Arif was working in his fields when she approached. He looked up, surprised to see her so early. "I have made my decision," she said firmly. "I don't want to live divided between two worlds anymore. My world is with you." Arif froze, the words too heavy for him to believe. "Sophia, do you know what you are saying? Your life will change. People will not understand." "I don't care what people understand," she replied, her voice steady. "They didn't risk their life for me. They didn't show me the meaning of honesty and courage. You did. If love is true, it should not matter where we come from." Tears filled his eyes, though he quickly blinked them away. He had always believed love like this was impossible for someone like him. Yet here it was, standing before him, real and undeniable. When the villagers learned of Sophia's decision, there was surprise, even shock. Some doubted it, others questioned it, but slowly, their doubts faded when they saw her commitment. She did not just visit as a guest anymore, she became part of their daily life. She helped in the fields, sat with the women to learn their ways, and gave support to improve the village school. People realized her love was not a passing fancy, it was true. In the city, her friends reacted with disbelief at first. Some called her foolish, others said she was giving up too much. But Sophia stood strong. She explained that success had given her everything except happiness, and she had finally found it in the most unexpected place. Days turned into weeks, and soon, her bond with Arif became unshakable. Their love was no longer just between two people, it spread into the lives of those around them. His children found in her not just a kind friend but a motherly figure. His old mother found in her a daughter she could rely on. And Arif found in her a partner who shared his burdens, lifted his spirit, and walked beside him in both hardship and peace. One evening, under the open sky filled with stars, Arif finally held her hand and spoke the words he had carried silently for so long. "Sophia, I may have nothing to give you but myself. No wealth, no fine house, no luxuries. But my heart belongs to you completely." She smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "And that is everything I ever wanted. Because love, Arif, is richer than all the gold in the world." Their union became a story for both the village and the city, a story of how fate can bring two completely different lives together, how kindness can plant the seed of love, and how courage can make it grow despite every barrier. People who once doubted now admired. They saw that true love does not ask about wealth or status, it only asks for honesty and devotion. And so, the poor farmer and the millionaire woman walked together into a new life. Their days were filled not with riches, but with laughter, shared struggles, and deep respect. They built a bridge between two worlds, showing that love is the only wealth that grows when it is given. What began with a cry for help on a dangerous road ended in a love story that inspired everyone who knew them. And whenever Sophia looked back on that day, she would whisper to herself with a smile, "Help," that one word changed everything.